Good evening, and welcome to the Illinois Symphony Orchestra's Sunday at 6 Recital Series. I am Executive Director Trevor Orthmann, and tonight you are in for a real experience as we feature our principal bass, Nick Adams, joined by his strange noise-making machine. Our Sunday at 6 performances are made possible through the generosity of our series sponsors, Dr. and Mrs. Dick McDaniel, Dr. Patricia and Randall Rushing, and an anonymous donor. And this evening's performance sponsors are my parents, Todd and Sandra Orthmann. Thank you so much for your support. Our next Sunday at 6 takes place on December 6th, featuring our percussion ensemble. On Saturday, December 12th at 7 p.m., we will celebrate the holidays with a live broadcast performance of our string orchestra partnering with the Springfield Ballet Company and Springfield Youth Ballet. Also, this Thursday evening at 6 p.m., Music Director Ken Lamb will be presenting a lecture on Beethoven as part of his 250th birthday celebration. Please check our website at ilsymphony.org for more details. Stay online for our Coda Conversations discussion with Nick and Ken immediately following the performance. We will be taking questions through the chat feature on YouTube and Facebook. Thank you so much for joining us, and now I'd like to turn it over to our music director, Ken Lamb.
Thank you, Trevor. Good evening, everyone. Tonight we're in for something quite interesting and a little bit different from what we have been experiencing in the past. The performer tonight is Nick Adams, who is our principal bass player. He joined the orchestra in February of 2018. He was educated in Indiana University, Pennsylvania, then Carnegie Mellon, and he joined the Orchestra of Chicago. That's when he moved to the area. Nick is a very interesting guy. And I say this because just talking to him, this is the most fascinating person with many interests. So I do hope you will stay behind after the recital to get to know Nick a little bit more. But for now, I'm going to give it over to Nick so that he can introduce to you the program.
How's it going, everybody? Appreciate you tuning in, and thank you, Ken and Trevor, for the introduction. Tonight, we have for you a suite of music I wrote called Suite for Upright Bass and Strange Sound Machine. It is about 30 minutes of music that I wrote entirely myself. Everything you hear, I either had the recording that I made, in the environment. I played the instruments. I recorded the synthesizer, the drums. Everything you hear was created by me and written by me. And kind of the inspiration for this piece was just kind of being in quarantine right now and living through, as the world as it is. We aren't playing concerts right now. So I wanted to kind of do something different and, take these, all these aspects of musical language I've learned through the jazz tradition, through classical, through, pop music and kind of sound design, and make some music that is a little bit different and is, to be honest, kind of simple, because I think right now simplicity is something we all need, and relaxation. So nothing is too out there or challenging. It's all written just to kind of immerse yourself in the sound. And because of that, I encourage everybody to use headphones or speakers if they have the ability to, because there's a lot of subtlety in the sound design behind this music. And it was inspired by a couple different composers. Judd Greenstein, Rachel Grimes, and Brian Eno are kind of my biggest influences when I write music. So the first piece is called Play. The first movement is called Play, and the setting is an orchestra stage from the musician's perspective. And so it starts off with some sound, what you would hear backstage, and the music is kind of I wanted to see how far I could go with just noises, without pitch, without anything. And so what you're going to hear is a improvisation with a lot of sound design and a lot of audio engineering tricks. And it's just meant to be fun. It's very reminiscent of Stomp or Blue Man Group, if you're familiar. And that'll flow into the second piece, which is, again, another idea. It's another exploration in how far can we go with one simple idea. How can we find new texture in what we have at our fingertips without having to go too far. And so it starts off with a string introduction and then brings in some piano and some other sound effects. And that piece was largely influenced by the chamber music group Now Ensemble and the pieces they perform. Yeah, I hope you enjoy it. And, at the end, there'll be a chance for me to answer any questions you have. So stick around to the end. All right, that was the first two pieces. Up next, we have another piece that is kind of more in the vein of like how far can we take just one simple idea. So it is a piece that features just pizzicato bass as the main driver of it, and it was inspired, um, I guess, loosely by a film called Waking Life, which deals a lot with lucid dreaming, and so the music is trying to emulate what it's like to trying to move through kind of a space which you feel stuck or a space which you feel pulled back. So the piece is kind of one giant crescendo. And by the end, there's a lot of different textures and kind of things in the periphery that are adding to the kind of simple main driving line. And following that, starts a couple pieces that I guess are more jazz inspired, but still in the same concept of ostinato and what could you pull from one phrase through dynamics, through color changes, through phrasing. And that piece in particular is inspired by two groups that are from, I guess, what you would consider like the modern jazz camp of a bass player named Avashi Cohen, who employs a lot of just like very rhythmically intensive music, and a band called Go Go Penguin, which is a jazz trio who, like I'm attempting to do, have music, but that they also have what's considered sound design and kind of audio engineering tricks that add another layer of depth to their compositions. So I hope you enjoy.
Two, three, 4.
minded anything about tonight?
I always work at night. Ladies and gentlemen, my subject is disturbed tonight. Her world is disturbed.
Perhaps the night was foggy.
But there was a full moon that night. And your daughter told me that you actually knew a werewolf.
Turned the next 72 hours into one long, hideous nightmare.
You really put on a wild show tonight.
minded anything about tonight. Not even the hamburger.
I always work at night. Ladies and gentlemen, my subject is disturbed tonight. Her world is disturbed.
Perhaps the night was foggy.
But there was a full moon that night. And your daughter told me that you actually knew a werewolf.
Turned the next 72 hours into one long, hideous nightmare.
You really put on a wild show tonight.
All right. So those couple pieces were also I forgot to mention beforehand. meant for some of the patrons that I've spoken to the past couple of seasons. I have a lot of conversations where people ask to hear more jazz music, whether they want to hear me play jazz on the bass. So when Chet had asked me to do this recital, I was like, oh, that's kind of a perfect place to do this. And so, yeah, if we've had that conversation before, some of that was for you. Up next, we have the final two pieces. The fifth movement is called I Can Recall. And this piece in particular kind of is like the most somber of all of this. And it's, I guess, is kind of semi describing what parts of, not being able to go out and play for people has felt like. It's very grounded in the same idea yet again, but trying to kind of look forward, but still feeling stuck in the same place. And it there's a theme that comes up about 3/4 of the way through that is from a Chicoria tune called Spain. And there's a version that Al Jarreau sings. He sings a vocal cover of a piano tune, and I think he puts his own lyrics to it. And it's always stuck with me. And I always find my fingers, whether I'm playing the keyboards or the bass or the guitar, my hands always end up on that phrase in some form or another. So I guess it is just kind of a part of me now. So it's ended up in this piece. Yeah, it's I guess this is a pretty personal one because parts of quarantine have been a little bit low, but it's still it's a thing we have to live through. So I figure I put it into the music. And the final piece is supposed to be just fun. It is, if you want to imagine, this is kind of like like you're traveling. Just imagine you're sitting on a street corner somewhere, and there's a little jazz combo playing a piece for you. Maybe you're sitting at a cafe. There's a lot of street sounds and voices you'll hear, and it's best just to close your eyes and imagine you're there. Imagine you're traveling, seeing the world again. And we'll get back to it. But the final piece is inspired by Pat Metheny. Pat Metheny was a musician that my first bass teacher, Nathan Santos, showed me. And it kind of was one of those moments of like, just mind being blown open of I didn't know music could sound that way. And it was kind of a pivotal person in my musical development. So I hope you enjoy. And final reminder, leave your questions in the comments, and I'd be happy to answer anything that you're curious about. Anything that you want me to expand upon, I'd be happy to talk about. So thank you, and I'll see you after. I hope you enjoy the last two pieces.
Okay, there we are. Thanks, Nick. Nick, you wrote all that stuff, all that music.
Correct. I wrote it. I played all the instruments. I recorded it and edited everything. So
So
all
can you
me.
tell us, what's the process? Obviously, we just heard a performance, which is sort of like all put together.
Sure.
I mean, yeah. And how long did it take you? And like, how does it happen?
Sure. Well, it happens in a bunch of different ways. I guess there's no one step-by-step process. So a lot of what I write comes from I have a bank of improvisations. So I spend a lot of time when I'm practicing just improvising. Um, and so when I knew I had to write this music, I sat down and just played for a few days and just left the microphone on and recorded everything down. Then I went back and I picked out the chunks that stuck or the chunks that felt like they could become more than what they were. So I ended up throwing a lot of stuff away, or following creative ideas that ended up not panning out this time. And I say this time because like I might go back in the future and pull that session up on my computer and listen and be re-inspired and write on top of that. But I guess the shortest answer is improvise, think about it, and build on top of that.
And how long did it take you to do all of that?
It was about 2 weeks of writing. So 2 weeks of, and I recorded as I went. So just kind of committed to the idea. When something felt good, you just keep it going. And if it sounded bad later, I would remove it. So there are a few whole movements that I wrote that even last week I was sitting there thinking this isn't going to work. So they went away.
Yeah. Now, I want you, before we get to the questions, like, so when when we think of Beethoven writing music,
Mhm.
we think of, a bunch of manuscript paper and notebooks and,
Mhm.
fiercely scribbling things down and tearing, ripping pages and so on.
Yeah.
Now, do you write your compositions on manuscript paper?
I
Like,
can show
how
you the
does it work
score.
for you?
You want to see the score? It
Yeah.
looks, I don't know if you'll all be able to see this, but this is the score. This is the
Aha.
score.
And
So
can
it's
you
all
hold it a
words.
little closer to the camera?
Yeah.
Oh wow! Can you just tell us, like in sort of overview of how that works?
Yeah. So I guess I don't even know how to put this in words. I just write down the ideas and I kind of think of things more in shapes and directions than harmonically or rhythmically or anything. I guess it's kind of it's a cop out to say synthesia, but it's something like that where I see structure and larger brush strokes and I know the feeling that I want to go for, or I know the emotion, I guess, and I try and work towards that. So I started with those are 5 different scenes that I had in my head. Like the last movement was sitting on a street corner. The previous one was sitting kind of in a church that echoes a whole lot. The previous one was kind of more like TV drama, kind of being in a like movie theater, big sound. So I guess that's was the very first starting point was feelings and settings, and then improvising, and then kind of building to meet the two of like the ideas that I had down and the places I wanted to go.
Well, let's take a question. Meredith Cargill, was anything you did challenging technically as a bass player?
Well, recording is never fun. No matter how much you do it, recording is never fun because as a musician, you only hear the things you don't like usually. So probably the most challenging part is just getting a takedown that I was satisfied with. So I recorded a lot of stuff and re-recorded and re-recorded and re-recorded because something might have been just a little out of tune. And yes, you can go back if you've just recorded down and fix individual notes, and that's what happens in the big studios. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to have somewhat of an authentic performance. So I guess getting through improvisations and whatnot, being satisfied is kind of there's a lot of technical challenges that come into that.
Now, just behind you, Nick, this is your studio, I understand, at your house.
Yeah.
There is more than just one double bass. Obviously, we heard you play other instruments in the recording. Like, so what other instruments do you play? Do you play all of that?
Yeah,
behind
everything
you?
behind me. Yeah, and there's
Oh
a
my
there's a drum
goodness.
set over that way.
Oh, you
So
do, you do that too?
Yeah, so I played the drums. I played a lot of it was keyboard and synthesizers, and so with synthesizers you can kind of sculpt whatever sound you want if you know how to use the computer to get what you want. So you still have to know how to play the keyboard. You still have to know how to get to the end goal and what the parameters within synthesizers are. So use those. I played a lot of bass. The guitar you heard was that guitar. There was some electric bass on there, a lot of drums, a lot of like hand percussion, and recording different objects in my house for incidental noises.
And so I guess you record. Do you record obviously everything individually, and then did you use a computer program and then just put everything together?
Yeah, so you use what's called a DAW, DAW, digital audio workstation, and so what it looks like is like a score. So there's a track for every single instrument, and so but instead of having manuscript notes, you have what's called a waveform. So you'll see, kind of like I forget what it's called, what they measure heartbeats with, but it kind of looks like that. And so you have a digital printout of what the sound is, and from there you use software to what's called mixing. So you edit everything to the space you want it, then you mix it, which means if you need to change the sound, if you want to put an echo on it, if you want to make it more bassy or less bassy, or if you want to make it louder or quieter, you can do a bunch of stuff. Then you can do special effects on top of that. So it's a process of thinking about it, writing it, recording it, editing it down to what you want, mixing it, and then you can master it if you want, which just makes it a louder, more cohesive sound.
So now you mentioned the whole process took you about 2 weeks.
Correct. Yeah.
So how can you sort of split it up? Like how much was to mix the thing? How much it was like creative, and like, or do you do everything at the same time?
It's pretty much all at the same time. For me, I just record as I go, and I kind of have this process of I add, I take something away, and then I transform something. So I kind of like force myself into a box of a process and hope something good comes out on the other side. And, if I had an infinite amount of time to work on this, I would probably keep refining it or changing it or adding parts or taking away parts. But I heard a movie composer that I can't remember his name of say that the score is never done. You just run out of time. So
yeah,
I had about 2 weeks with everything else I do in life. I had about 2 weeks to devote to this. And that was probably a few hours every night, just down here writing and recording and listening back and editing. And then there's kind of a final couple of passes afterwards of just mixing and just making sure that all your, I guess everything sounds the way you want it to. It all gels together and you don't have frequencies fighting other frequencies. It's a lot like being a conductor on a podium. You're sitting there and thinking critically of, is the balance here right? Is it far enough the left channel or the right channel? Is the stereo image wide enough? Is it loud enough? Is there, are there any issues? Are there any technical issues that you need to adjust?
Yeah. So, let's see. We have another question from Victoria Johnson. My late husband started on the viola as a child before going to the string bass. Since this is such a large instrument, are there any recommendations for a child beginning the bass? Good question.
That is a great question. Well, luckily nowadays you can get, I think it's down to a 16th size bass. So they make basses itty bitty little things, or you could start on cello. I know a number of basses that start on cello and then switch over to bass when their physiology allows for it. But honestly, there are a number of bass players that started off as piano players or as violin players. I had a teacher who plays in the Pittsburgh Symphony now, Jeff Grubbs. He started off as a violin player and then switched to bass at 18. So I think what's most important for children is just the musical foundation, because that's consistent across no matter, any instrument that you play, is knowing, tone, time, rhythm, pitch, So I would say find a thing that works for you, whether that be playing a cello or a smaller size bass or another instrument, and then transitioning over to bass.
Yeah, Nick, on that, I mean, I think I remembered you once, we had a conversation and you told me about basically your story, growing up and then how you got into the bass. I just find it a very interesting story. Would you like to just, I mean, share that with everyone? Like,
Sure.
how did you get to where you are today?
I'm gonna need to take one pause and plug in my computer because it's about to die. So give me 30 seconds.
Okay. I see a question from Yona, the professor at UIS. Can you explain the difference between various bow holds that bassists use? Well, that's a very professorly question, Yona. I'm sure Nick would be very glad to answer that too.
All right, and I'm back. So your first question was how I got into the bass, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. So I guess this easiest way to put it is I started playing the electric bass towards the tail end of middle school and into high school, and I, as a rebellious youngster, did not want to take music lessons because I did not want to have my creativity stifled, as I put it to myself, which really meant I didn't want to have to work hard. So didn't take formal lessons until about, I think, my sophomore or junior year of high school. And even then I played in a couple of school ensembles, but I wasn't very involved. I had about a year of youth orchestra experience, and then I think my senior year of high school, my teacher at the time, Nathan Santos, called me and said, "Hey, we have a concert with the Johnstown Symphony and we need a bass player tomorrow. Can you do it? Can you, make it work?" And I said, "Okay." And so I showed up and we played Bolero, New World Symphony by Dvorak, and I can't remember what else, but it was pretty exhilarating. And then I think from then I was just kind of hooked. And it was my senior year of high school. I didn't have really any plans either way for college, and my mom kind of said, "You're going to school for music." And I said, "What?" She said, "You're going to go learn the double bass. You're going to get better at it. It'll be great." And I said, "I guess so." So my mom encouraged me. Yeah, I guess she didn't give me another option. She said, "You're going to go play the bass. It's going to be great, and you're going to do fine." And I said, "Okay." And I went and I applied to the college that my high school teacher was teaching at, Indiana University of Pennsylvania, and it went great. I became obsessed with practicing. I became obsessed with just learning everything I could about the bass and took it as seriously as I could, to the point where I was just like, there's no more hours in the day to practice. And my mom had to then tell me to stop practicing because she said I needed a social life. And I was, kind of funny how it worked from kind of pseudo non-interest to absolutely obsessed. And then from there, it didn't stop. I just keep on following wherever I can go with music. And I've gotten to play all over the world and, record tons of different kinds of music, play different kinds of concerts, meet tons of people. And now I'm living in Chicago and I'm getting the chance to write music and do all these fun things. So yeah, it's kind of a different story than most people that start young and do the lessons and competitions and camps and whatnot. I feel like I fumbled my way into what I'm doing, and it's a lot of fun. And I really appreciate that there's many people along the way to help me and a lot of people to guide me and give me opportunity.
Now, Nick, you mentioned fun things. We'll get back to the fun things in just a second. But Jonas was asking, can you explain the differences between the various bow holds that bassists use?
Sure. So there's two main ones. The one you saw me performing the videos was a French bow hold. So it's an overhand hold, similar to cello and the rest of the string family. The other one you'll see, we have a couple players in the section at ISO that use the German bow hold. So it's an underhand. I don't have a German bow here to show you, but I could be wrong. But my understanding is that the underhand bow hold came over from the viol da gamba family way of playing instruments. And so the bass is a hybrid from a couple different traditions, and the kind of double bass we know wasn't standardized for a long time. So we had this instrument that nebulously covered the bass region below what we now know as the cello, that was a bunch of different forms and a bunch of different schools of thought. And so that kind of splintered through history, and now we have various bow holds. But there's two main ones with the French and the German. People will bicker about it back and forth, but they both do great things. It's very helpful to know both traditions because they both complement one another. It's great to have it in the section too because they both lend to kind of different delicacies. So yeah, I guess I hope that answers your question.
That's great. We have another question from Meredith. As you were playing, you were looking at a computer screen, wearing earphones to hear your backing tracks.
For some of it, some of the pieces, I just played the bass, and then everything else you heard was in response to the bass. But a few of the tracks, yes, I did have the track playing in the background. I was wearing in-ear monitors, and some of them I was just listening to a metronome and improvising to a metronome, and then later took that into the computer, set it to the grid as we call it, and built off that.
That's great. Now, on to fun things. Oh, hang on. We have another question. Well, this is great. We actually, this is the most questions we've had, Nick, in one of these concerts. I think he heard Pat Metheny in your second piece and then woven through the rest of them. Do you know Sandy Ball, an instrumentalist who composed and played every instrument? Love your work.
Well, thank you for the compliment. I don't know the musician you're referencing. I'll have to look them up. Yeah, thanks for that. Pat Metheny was a huge influence on my playing, and his first album he played with a bass player named Jaco Pastorius, who is kind of the I don't know how you'd say it. He was the person that took the electric bass from an instrument that people kind of ignored to its virtuosic standard as it is. And so he played with Weather Report and Pat Metheny before his unfortunate early death. But yeah, Pat Metheny, fantastic stuff. Love his solo work, love his compositional ideas. I wish I could play just like him, but maybe someday.
All right, now the fun things you were talking about. Now I understand, Nick, that you don't just play the bass or just compose. You actually do many other things. Can you tell us, how you've been spending these few months, and where do you go from here?
Yeah, so I have what I would call a creative dilemma and life problem where I want to do all creative things. I love all forms of art, especially visual arts in terms of like design and drawing and painting and video production. And so what Ken is referring to is I am a part owner of a video production company. Well, I guess it's media production across the board, and I do a lot of graphic design work, project management. We produce a couple small shows. We do kind of anything that people need creatively accomplished, whether it be ideation or website building, video production. So yeah, I try and just keep myself as busy as possible because as much as I love the bass and I spend as much time as I can playing with it, I really like the influence of other mediums and learning from other disciplines under the creative umbrella, as well as disciplines outside the creative umbrella. I think there's a lot of parallels to be drawn from things like endurance sports and engineering that you can implement to music and kind of take it in new directions. So I try and just stay as busy as possible, and I'm always just kind of like looking around the corner to see what's there and trying to interject music into it.
Now, Nick, you just mentioned endurance sport.
Yeah.
Is there something I don't know yet? I mean, are you into what sort of endurance sports are you into now?
Oh, I really like long distance running, long distance biking. Yeah, huge fan of things that take kind of, I guess, a lot of self-determination and discipline. So I've huge respect for athletes across the board. But yes, there's something I think that's something that is common between people that do endurance sports and people that practice instruments or pursue creative, even if it's charcoal painting, you have to spend a lot of time alone. There's a lot of time in solitude. There's a lot of time where you have to handle, negative self-talk or know what kind of feedback to glean and know how to build your own path is a really tough thing to manage. So I think learning from people outside the discipline can influence your discipline.
Wow. So, Nick, I assume I know you're still relatively young. Certainly, in comparison to the rest of us. Where do you like with all this things that you're in so many different things? Of course, you're practicing the bass too. Um, where do you even see yourself in 10 years' time?
Oh, I wish I knew. I just try and keep myself in a position where, to a certain extent, next year is a question mark, if that makes sense. And if I'm creating, if I'm involved with communications with people, if it's anything that feels interesting, I kind of walk towards it. And sometimes that's a bad idea. There's a lot of things that I've pursued and I've spent a lot of time on that were not dead ends but weren't useful. And so yeah, I guess I just like being in a position where there seems to be another step up, whether that's like playing in a higher level orchestra or playing music that's more challenging, or being in a situation where I have to kind of I don't know, strengthen my creative problem solving skills. So to answer your question, I don't know. I hope it involves music, as music most of the time, but music all the time I don't think is good. I think you need to have other things going on. So I try and keep enough slack in my life that I can have other things and have the time to learn and reflect and bring it back to music.
Yeah. Well, that's great. One thing though, Nick, that I think we have been able to accomplish in the ISO is to fill our bass section.
Yeah.
So, right. I mean, I think for the longest time, probably this first time in the last maybe 10 years, we have a full bass section. How do you feel about your colleagues? And
Oh,
now
they're
we have.
wonderful. They're so wonderful. I mean, bass players, I feel like they're all, I don't know, I haven't met a bass player that I didn't get along with, but the bass players we have in the section, they've become really, really good friends. We spend, a lot of us like go exercise together in between rehearsals and whatnot. We go and get food together. We text each other just to check in during this whole thing. And so it's really something to play with a group of people that you genuinely have a connection with. And so I feel like there's just like an amount of trust that comes from friendship in the section and whatnot. And we've been able to build just a really fun section in the ISO, and I trust those guys a lot, and I want the best for them. And if they need something, if they need an excuse for something, it's just good to know that I can have people behind me that I trust and that they support me. And if I do something wrong, they're there to give me a hand. It's just wonderful. I can't say enough good things about all those guys.
And I know you have been in touch with them. How are they all doing?
I think they're all doing well. We keep in touch as much as we can, and I think everybody has a really level head in the bass section. So we're all keeping it together. Checking in on one another. I know they're all taking care of themselves. They're all good about that. So yeah, I'm hoping very soon we can all be on the stage together and making a lot of ruckus.
Yeah, absolutely. That's hopefully that will happen very soon. Nick, I want to see if there are any other questions. If not, I'd like to thank you, Nick, for this really creative recital. It is really quite unlike anything we've had so far, and the interest you can see. There and we have the far more questions than before, which is a really, really great thing. So
if anybody
thanks
has
again.
more
I hope
questions, they can reach out to me. I'll respond to email if ask Chet for my contact, and we can have a chat about music or anything else.
That's great. Well, Nick, I know you've you have worked really, really hard on this, and I know Chet and you have been corresponding. I know you probably deserve a really good rest right now. So I'm going to, on that note, I'm going to hand it back to Trevor. Okay, so thank you so much, Nick.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Nick. And I just want to remind everybody to join us on December 6th and wish everybody a safe and happy Thanksgiving. And we will see you back in about 3 weeks for the next Sunday at 6 with our percussion ensemble. And then we will wrap it up for this year on December 20th with our principal violist. So thank you so much for joining us this evening, and have a good day.